Hello and welcome to this PIR live event webinar brought to you by Partners in Research Canada. My name is Ben Hobbs and I will be your host today. If you're joining us live, remember that you can ask questions anytime by clicking the chat near the bottom center of your screen and typing your questions to the pop-up window. Make sure to change the to field to include attendees so that everyone can see your questions, and I will relay these questions to our guests during the Q&A portion of this webinar. So today we have Dr. Emma Allen-Vercoe joining us. Dr. Vercoe is a professor in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology at the University of Guelph, where she studies the human microbiota and its influence on human health and disease. Emma is also the recipient of the 2018 Partners in Research Biomedical Ambassador Award. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Vercoe. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. So I think I just press share screen. All right. Okay. Can you see that? Is everything okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that looks great.
All right. So hi, everyone. Really great to be here, and I really love doing these kinds of things. It would be awesome to hear where everyone's coming from as well. So in the questions part at the end, I'm really excited to see. I see we have some from Calgary and some from Scarborough, so that's great. I was in Calgary last week actually, so it's kind of fun to see that there's some participants from Calgary. So, so welcome. I guess today I'm going to teach you a little bit about some microbiology. And so for some of you, you probably don't know what microbiology is. Don't worry, I'm going to talk you through it. But microbes, or the things that we study in microbiology, are your invisible friends. And I'm going to try and convince you that, that you have a lot of friends that live on your body that take care of you. So let's see how we go. So first of all, some of you might not know what microbes are. So you just have to imagine that microbes, they're creatures just like we're creatures, but they're alive just like we're alive. But we cannot see these creatures with our human eyes. Doesn't matter how much you squint, you won't be able to see these microbes. So actually we need an instrument that we call a microscope to see these tiny, tiny creatures. There's a picture of a microscope there, that blue microscope. Something like that will allow you to see what these microorganisms look like, what these microbes look like. And the microbes include creatures that you might have heard about before. They include things called bacteria. And they include things called viruses. And I suspect that most of you have only heard about these things from the point of view of the bad guys, the bad things that they do. Viruses can make people very sick, and so can some bacteria. And I'm going to try and convince you that that's not the whole story. So let's see if we can go from there. So first of all, I want to just get your heads around the idea of how big microbes really are, or how small they are, in fact. So just in your classroom groups there, I want you to just tend to take a couple of seconds to discuss how many bacteria do you think you could fit on the head of a pin? Okay, so imagine the head of a pin. Do you think it would be 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 or more than 1,000,000? How many bacteria do you think could you fit on that head of a pin? So just discuss amongst yourselves. I know I can't hear you, but I just want you to have a shout out what you think the answer is to your classmates, and then I'm going to tell you the answer in just a few seconds. Okay, so the answer is actually more than 1,000,000. You can fit more than 1,000,000 bacteria on the head of a pin. Just imagine that for a second. And viruses are even smaller than bacteria. They're about 100 times as small as bacteria, and even sometimes smaller than that. So they really are very, very tiny, tiny little creatures. Now here is a picture of the pointy end of a pin that is being magnified using a very special microscope, way, way, way bigger than we could actually see with the naked eye. And it's been colored so that the red there that you can see, that's the actual metal of the pin. You can see that it's not even smooth when you're looking at under the microscope at this magnification. But the thing that I want you to see most of all are the little orange things that are stuck to the surface. Those are bacteria. You can see that they're sticking in clumps and in groups, and you can see how many of them there are. So you couldn't possibly see those with the naked eye or with your eye, but you need a microscope to be able to see them. So now you have an idea of just how big these tiny organisms are. let's just talk a second about germs. So microbes are, or germs are microbes, but microbes are not all germs, okay? So you might have heard about germs before, and germs are the sorts of microbes that are the bad guys, that they can make some people very sick. And this is actually why it's very important to wash your hands with soap and water. Don't use hand sanitizer because that's actually not good for your skin or your good microbes. But just with soap and water is fine. And if you do that after you've used the bathroom or before you eat, then you're going to do a lot to keep yourself well and keep the bad guys away. And so there are very, very many types of germs that can make you sick, but there are also a huge number more microbes that actually keep you well. So the ones that make you sick are the ones that we know most about because we've been studying them for most of the time. But for the most part, the microbes that are all around us, and especially the ones that live on our bodies, that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, they don't make you sick. In fact, they are protective. They keep you healthy. And so those are the ones that I study in my lab, and I think that those are the most important ones because we've really ignored them for the longest time. And so we really need to start thinking about these microbes in a little bit different way. And because these microbes are invisible to us, we don't think about them. We just ignore them. And I think that that's a problem too, because they turn out to be very, very important. So, where can you find microbes on your body? Well, you can find them all over your skin and your hair, in your ears, and your eyes, and your nose. There's many, 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 many of them in your mouth as well. They're absolutely everywhere. And so those microbes on your skin, they're very, very important to keep your skin healthy. And the ones in your hair are important to keep your hair healthy. And the ones in your mouth, some of them anyway, are very important to keep your mouth healthy. But there are some not so good microbes in your mouth too. And that's why it's really important that you brush your teeth every day and that you floss. So the most microbes in and on the body are actually found in your gut. Okay, so let's think about your gut. What do I mean when I say your gut? So this is where you digest your food. So when you swallow your food, it goes down into your stomach, and then it goes on a very, very, very long journey through what we call the small intestine, and then into the large intestine. And the large intestine, we also call it a colon. And you can see it there. I put an arrow there to show you where your colon is in your body. And the colon, I've made it bigger there so you can actually see what it looks like. It looks like a sort of a weird looking snake with a funny looking tail. So that little tiny tail that you can see just here, the little tiny tail that's coming off it here, that's actually that's your appendix. So some of you might know your appendix because that's, some of you may have even been unfortunate enough to have needed to have it removed because sometimes it can get inflamed and it can cause disease. But that actually is quite an important little organ as well. It contains an awful lot of bacteria. In fact, this whole colon contains a great deal of bacteria, and these bacteria, it's like a big factory of microbes which are making molecules to keep you healthy. And we call the whole collection of microbes on your body a microbiome, and we call the collection of microbes in your gut the gut microbiome. Okay, so you might hear me talking about the microbiome, and that's what I mean. It's the whole community of microbes. It's like a city. So if your body is a planet, is the planet Earth, then your colon is like the mega city. It's like a big bustling city like Toronto or London in the UK where I'm from. It has a very, very, very large population. And in contrast, the microbes on your skin, that area is more like a desert. So that's more like where there's not too many people that live there. There's still people that live there, but there's still microbes that live there, but not quite as many. But the colon is very, very important. So this is actually a real picture of what your microbes look like. And this is microbes growing in a sample of poop. And so what we can do is we can take a sample of poop from a very willing volunteer, and we can put it under an instrument that we call an electron microscope. And that allows us to really, really magnify the image much, much higher than we can do with a regular light microscope. And then we can start to see what these microbes look like. So you can see these kinds of things. This one looks rather like a peanut in the middle here. And the ones around it, some of them look like they've got fuzzy coats. They're actually very different type of bacteria, and they're all growing together in a community that is actually feeding on the food that you have eaten, that the person whose poop this is has eaten. And you can see that they're doing a very good job of eating it. So when microbes eat things, they don't have mouths, or bacteria don't have mouths, but they bind things, and so they stick to them, and they kind of break them down, and then absorb all of the beneficial molecules. So what do your microbes do to keep you healthy? So everyone knows, hopefully, that we have something called an immune system to help us to be protected from germs. But in fact, did you know that it's your microbiome, these tiny microbes in your body, that actually teaches your immune system how to tell the difference between good microbes and bad germs? And that's something that we didn't realize until fairly recently. And now we can see why it's very important that we have this very, very diverse microbiome living on our bodies, because it's helping our immune systems to recognize what's good and what's bad. What else do your microbes do to keep you healthy? Well, the microbiome helps your body to digest food, and it makes vitamins and lots of other important chemicals that your body needs. I bet you didn't know that your microbes in your gut make vitamins to help keep you healthy. You don't need to necessarily take vitamins every day, because if you eat a healthy diet, something like these fruits and vegetables and grain products every day, then your microbes will do all that work for you and turn it into vitamins that your body can absorb and use. And so you don't need to take multivitamins if you eat a healthy diet and you have a healthy gut. What else does your microbes do to keep you healthy? They actually help to stop germs from hurting you. So you can imagine that you have microbes in your gut that look like these green microbes at the bottom here. And they're a little bit like a police force. They keep the bad microbes from doing damage to your body. So they're actually making molecules and interacting with the bad microbes to try to keep them from being bad in your body, and to sort of allow them to be washed away, and so that the good microbes can remain, and they're looking after you. And then bad microbes are, they'll leave the body without doing any damage. And so that's quite an important thing that they do. I think you'll agree. And so that's why we have to look after our microbes in our body, because they are looking after us. And so that's a very important thing to do. So what can we do to look after our healthy microbes? Well, the biggest thing that you can do is to feed them. The best thing that you can do is to feed them. And the thing is, they don't like to eat junk food, okay? They prefer to eat fresh fruits and vegetables. So in terms of the gut microbes, the ones that live in your colon, think of it as a really big army, a mighty army that is keeping you healthy. And if you want that mighty army to keep you healthy, you're going to have to keep that army very well fed. And in order to keep them well fed, they like to eat the types of things that our human body can't eat, and that's a substance called fiber. And you're going to find most of that fiber, that beneficial fiber, in fruits and vegetables, and especially raw fruits and vegetables, where raw fruits and vegetables can be eaten, and also grains. And so it's very important to eat those sorts of foods in your diet every day. And you might have heard Health Canada recommend that you should eat 5 to 6 servings of fresh fruit or vegetables every day. And I wonder how many of you in your groups and your classrooms actually do that. And so that's something that you can really work on. It's a very, very good habit to have for life. And so if you're anything like my young daughter, who's at school right now, and probably contemplating lunch, she's probably going to open her lunch and find her apple, and her apple will come back home uneaten, because that's something that she just doesn't really like to eat fruit. So I keep trying to encourage her to do it, and she knows why. But I wonder how many of you eat your lunch and then you leave your fruit, or you leave your apple, and it just goes on an outing back and forth, back to school and back. So try not to do that. Try and eat your apple or any of the fruit that's been put in your lunch first of all, because you've got to think about feeding this army. And if you just feed this army, it will take care of you. So really try to think about eating those fresh fruits and vegetables as much as you can. Don't eat processed food. Now, your gut microbes actually can get very, very sick if you eat too much junk. And so all these things in this picture, like soda and chips and cookies and syrup and cake and all of these kinds of things, they're not going to hurt you necessarily, but if that's all you eat, what you're doing is you're starving your microbes. So it's okay to eat this kind of stuff occasionally, But if you're going to do that, you've got to really, really try and make sure that you use your, that you eat your fruits and vegetables. And another thing that you can do to look after your healthy microbes is you can exercise. Believe it or not, we now know that your microbiome benefits from chemicals that are made by your body when you're active. So the more that you get out there and you do activities, sports, or you just get out and ride your bike, or you do a lot of running and playing with your friends outside away from screens, then that's actually going to help your microbiome as well. So believe it or not, even just by eating, that's going to help you if you eat healthy food. But if even just exercising is really going to help things as well. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions from any of the classroom groups, and I'm more than happy to take them.
Thank you, Emma. That was very interesting. I'm certainly guilty of that back and forth with the fruit in the classroom. So why is it that there's such an aggregation of microbes in our colon compared to our skin?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think it's because in the human body, the colon is actually designed as a little fermentation chamber, we call it. It was a little place that our body has created to make microbes very, very comfortable. And so the microbes that live there are extremely comfortable. They really like it as long as we're eating our vegetables. And they proliferate there very well. And there's an awful lot of different types of microbes that can live in that environment that's being produced. Now, if you think about your skin every day, especially if you think about your hands or your arms or your face, that skin is exposed to all sorts of elements, like you're outside playing, it's exposed to sunlight, it's exposed to fresh air. And so those kinds of things, the microbes that can survive that need to have special protective gear to be able to do that. So there aren't so many microbes that can live on your skin. There are still a lot of microbes living on your skin, believe me. But they're very different types of microbes to the ones that live in your gut.
Interesting. Could I just get you to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we have another question. Where do microbes originally come from? How did they originally get into our gut and colon?
Oh, that's a really good question. So microbes, it turns out, have been around for billions of years. So humans have been around for maybe 500,000 years. Not very long in comparison to microbes. Microbes have been on the planet far longer than we have. And so when mammals started to evolve eons ago, microbes decided that it's actually a really good, safe place to live inside mammals. And the reason for that is because we offer them lots of shelter. So if they're inside our bodies, they're not getting gobbled up by other things that are in the environment. And so that keeps them very safe. And so we've evolved this relationship. And in fact, the microbes in our guts have provided us with so much that we can't do as humans. Our human cells are not very good at some forms of what we call biochemistry. They're not very good at making things, whereas microbes are extremely good at that because they've been around for a lot longer. And so we benefit from them and they benefit from us.
We're the new kids on the block.
Yeah.
So what would the consequence be if we lost a significant proportion of these microbes in our colon?
Oh, another really good question. So that is actually a question that is very forefront in my mind because that's what I research. So we think that actually in a modern life, the lifestyle that we live, where we take a lot of antibiotics and we eat a lot of bad food and we don't exercise enough, and all of those kinds of things, we're actually losing a lot of our microbes. And so the consequences we can see, we now see a lot more disease, what we call chronic disease, or the sorts of diseases that are not caused by microbes, like infectious disease. And we're seeing that more and more. And so we're wondering whether some of these diseases are actually associated with the damage that we're doing to our microbes in our gut.
How much bacteria is on our body?
Well, if you were to scrape off all the microbes on your body and in your body and put it into a big jar, if it was possible to do that, it would weigh about as much as 1.5 bags of sugar. So that's a lot of microbes. Now you remember that they're very, very, very tiny. So in fact, there's about, I think it's about 4 trillion bacterial cells on your body alone. And trillion is a very large number.
Wow, so there's more bacterial cells than our own cells that make us up.
Yes, in fact, there's about 1.3 times as many bacterial cells as there are human cells on our bodies.
Interesting. So, is there any way we can get rid of the bad microbes?
I think that there's different types of bad microbes. There are microbes which are really bad guys that you really shouldn't come into contact with. And those ones, for the most part, you can be vaccinated against them so that they never cause you a problem. Your immune system has been directed against them. It's being taught how to deal with it. So there are also a bunch of microbes that we call opportunistic pathogens. It's a very long word. That just means that for the most part they behave themselves, but sometimes when you give them the opportunity, they start behaving badly, just like some kids in the classroom sometimes, I should guess. So and the reason that that you're healthy for the most part is because the good microbes in your gut keep those bad microbes from behaving badly. And so if you can keep them from behaving badly, they'll actually be good, generally good microbes, and they can actually be beneficial to you. And so it's about keeping a healthy balance of good bacteria and keeping a good diet, good healthy diet to keep that in check.
We have a question from Claire at Bellwood Public School, and she would like to know, what are some of the sicknesses microbes cause?
Well, there's many types of sicknesses. I think, let's see, you've probably heard most of all about things like food poisoning. So when you have food poisoning, it's usually caused by any one of a number of microbes. And those microbes could actually be bacteria or they can be viruses, and they can make you feel very sick. You can be throwing up, you can have diarrhea, and they make you feel just generally awful. And there are different types of microbes that cause different types of diarrhea. It's an unfortunate fact. There's also, whenever you get the common cold, that's caused by a virus, and that virus is very easily spread from person to person. And you most often see that in the wintertime, and the reason for that is because we don't go outside as much in the wintertime, and we don't open the windows as much, and so the viruses are concentrated in an area like a classroom. Influenza is another viral infection that can cause a very nasty disease, and that's an important one to be vaccinated against. When you're very young, you get vaccinated against tetanus and diphtheria and measles and mumps and rubella and a number of other things. So those are a mixture of bacteria and viruses that cause these nasty diseases. And they are very, very serious diseases, and that's why we have these kinds of vaccination strategies. So that's why you get these horrible needles that nobody likes, but they're actually keeping you extremely safe and keeping you from getting these nasty infections.
Do these microbes die after a certain amount of time, or do they live forever?
Yeah, well, so microbes, they don't live forever, for sure. In fact, some of them probably only live for a number of days. But what they do that's very special that we can't do as humans is that they can multiply very fast. And so in order to multiply, they just divide. Does that make sense? In order to multiply, they divide. So what happens is that one cell splits in half and becomes two cells, so they divide in half. And they can do that, and then every one of those two cells then divides in half again, and so they can grow very, very quickly. And so when they do that, when they divide in two, they're basically making an exact replica of themselves. So that essentially you're not actually losing any microbes, you're just getting microbes that are proliferating themselves, and they're keeping themselves going. Interesting.
So we know microbes are really small, but what's bigger, an atom or a microbe?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, microbes are made of atoms, and so atoms are the smallest thing that we know that exists. Well, there's other particles as well, but that's getting into particle physics. It's probably a little bit beyond today. But atoms are very much smaller than microbes. They're very, very tiny.
Why is it that our immune systems are sometimes confused and will kill good bacteria or microbes?
Oh, well, there's a very good example of what can happen here. So our immune systems tend to get confused if we don't train them properly. And the training period happens to be when you're very, very young, when you're 3 years old or younger than that. And so if you don't train your microbes properly during this time, then you could end up with allergies and asthma. And I expect lots of people in the classrooms now listening to me suffer from these things, and they can be really annoying, I know. But that's caused by the microbes not really being recognized properly by the immune system because they haven't had the right lessons early in life. And so that's one of the things that can cause a problem. And what happens if your microbes start killing off your body starts killing off your good microbes, and that does happen, then we see other diseases happening, and those tend to happen later in life. Things like heart disease and rheumatoid arthritis, and the sorts of things that maybe your grandparents or your parents may suffer from.
Interesting. So is that why it's so important to get outside when you're young and play around?
Yes, we have a saying in our lab that it's really good to go and roll around in the dirt sometimes, because that's where most of these microbes are actually, we think, coming from early in life. And so you get a lot of microbes that come from your parents and from your mother when you're born, and then you pick up a lot of microbes from the environment that you live as well. So if you live inside a city block, and you never see soil, then you're probably not picking up enough microbes. So it's a good idea to go to the local park, go dig in the sand, go dig in the dirt, and it's also very good, believe it or not, to have a pet. So if you have a pet that goes outside, like a dog or a cat, that's actually been shown to be very good for your microbiome as well, because you share your microbes with your dog or your cat. That sounds gross, but it's true.
Is it possible for any of these microbes to cause diseases like cancer?
Yes, and in fact, we work on a disease called colorectal cancer. That's the disease of the colon. That's that organ that I showed you. And we've shown that it's actually caused by a bad microbe called, it's got a long name called Fusobacterium nucleatum. And we've shown that microbe actually causes the disease, and it can be, it's a very slowly progressing disease, but that progression can be, as it develops, it can happen faster if you've got the wrong types of microbes in your colon.
Kavishna from Bellwood would like to know, is it possible for these bad microbes to cause emotional health problems?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes, it is. So we're seeing more and more that people who have anxiety or depression or some other sorts of mental illnesses actually have a microbiome in their gut, of all places, that looks different from that of people who don't suffer from these diseases. And so there's been a lot of very good work that's being done on this, and it really looks like the microbes in your gut, in your colon, your gut microbiome, can actually influence the way that you think and the way that you feel. And so when you have a gut feeling, maybe there's some real truth to that saying, that you really do have a gut feeling. And perhaps as well, when you have a craving for some kind of food, it could be that your microbes in your gut are telling you that you need that kind of food. I wouldn't say that if it's chocolate, though. So a chocolate craving is probably not caused by microbes.
Is it possible for us to rub off these microbes?
On your skin?
On our skin.
On our skin? Well, I would say no, because so if you look at your hands and you look at your skin, you can see there's a surface. Now that surface on your hands is covered by all the microbes that you're touching. Desk, your pencils, your pens, the door handle, the toilet flusher if you didn't wash your hands when you left the bathroom, all of those kinds of things, you're picking up those microbes. And those you can wash off with soap and water very easily. But if you look as well, your skin is actually made up of several layers. And the microbiome that's associated with your skin is in fact deeper into the skin, underneath the top layer. So it's kind of hidden and sheltered away. And that's why it's important to not use hand sanitizer, because hand sanitizer unfortunately penetrates a little bit further into your skin and kills off those beneficial microbes. And so hand sanitizer, although lots of people use it a lot of the time, it's okay to use if you're in a petting zoo or something and you have no other way of washing your hands, but otherwise it's much safer for your microbes and much safer for your microbiome to just wash your hands with soap and water.
Thank you. For any of the students that might have an interest in this topic, what does the career path look like for a microbiologist?
Well, so believe it or not, I'm a microbiologist, but I started out in my career doing astrophysics. So that's quite different. I wanted to be a space scientist. That's all I wanted to do with my life. And but then I discovered microbiology and realized that there's this whole universe that's around us, which is just tiny. You can't see it because it's so tiny, but it's just like a whole universe. And so my career path, I did a degree so I did my first degree, or my undergraduate degree, Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry. And then after that, I went to work for the government as a government scientist, and that's where I learned about microbiology. But microbiology is taught in many universities across Canada. We have a very good program here at Guelph. So microbiology is a very up-and-coming subject as well. So it's something that is being expanded in many different universities as well. So the career path, you can do an awful lot with microbiology. As a microbiologist, you could be an academic like I am. You could work for industry. So you could work in a company that is making pharmaceuticals or probiotics or something. You could become a doctor with microbiology because medical doctors, a medical degree can be founded on the microbiology degree. Yeah, there's many things that you can do. In fact, if I look at all of the students that I've taught over the years, I'm surprised where some of them have ended up.
Is it possible for these good microbes to turn bad?
Oh, that's a very good question. So I think that comes back to that point I was raising about what we call the opportunistic pathogens. So those are, generally speaking, pretty good guys, but just like bad kids in the classroom, or not bad kids, or just like, give kids an opportunity to mess around in the classroom, then they're going to mess around. So some of those microbes can do that, and when they mess around, they can cause damage, and that can cause a problem. So good microbes, yes, they can turn bad, but generally speaking, the really bad microbes, the ones that really don't want to have anywhere near us, they're bad all the time. They're just evil. And the ones that live in our bodies as part of us that can turn bad, they can be kept in a good state, or they can be told to behave well, as long as we and our bodies tell them to behave well, and they're fed a good diet.
Can microbes live in our brain?
Ooh, now there's a very interesting question. So there's a lot of work that's done on this. So we used to think that the brain is sterile. In other words, there's no microbes that live in there whatsoever. But certainly some recent work has shown that there may be some microbes that actually live in our brain. The problem is that we don't know whether that's causing disease or whether or not it's just because they happen to live there. And there are very, very few of them. Compared to the gut, it's very, very, very few. It's like living on the North Pole. There aren't very many people living there. But we don't know really is the answer to that question, because it's actually very difficult to do those kinds of experiments to look for microbes in the brain. Microbes are tiny, tiny things, and you don't often get to look in someone's brain until they're dead. So often it's very difficult to get the right kinds of samples to be able to tell.
Well, thank you. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for taking the time to tell us about the role microbes play in our bodies and for answering all our questions.
You're welcome.
So next week on PIR Lab Event, we're discussing the monarch butterfly, the long distance champion of the butterfly world. For more information about these webinars and other PIR educational programs, please visit pirweb.org. Thank you for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.